Okay, we're very happy to be sitting with Hilary Greenland from Sylvan Archery. The first, I think, Longbow bowyer we've interviewed on this series. So Hilary, thank you for giving us some of your time.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Excellent. Your name actually has come up a lot in some of the other interviews, so I thought it'd be very relevant and important to have you on as well. Seeing as we are in the UK, I haven't actually done anyone, a bow maker in the UK yet, and I think you more than anyone would be a good person to represent the longbow makers. So first question, the name Sylvan Archery, which is your website, where did that name come from?
Well, Sylvan means trees, forest. And okay. I had a book called Sylvania, which was about trees. And I love trees anyway, so I thought, oh, well, right. That's a good name.
Interesting. I didn't know that. Is that an original English word, or is that Latin or something, or I don't know?
I have absolutely no idea.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, that's something new. You always been into archery? Were you doing something previous to making longbows, or was it always kind of a part of your life?
No, well, in a previous life, I was an architect, which was quite a stressful job. And I used to play squash a lot. Okay. And I was always injuring myself, bouncing off walls. Anyway, I thought I'd better do something a little more relaxed.
Right.
So I started with the A's, and aerobics, no. Athletics, no. Right. Archery, And I remembered when I was a kid, I looked like the Milky Bar Kid. You won't know about him, but he had a page boy hairstyle.
I vaguely remember him, yeah.
Well, I looked just like him when I was 6. Right, and a lodger in the flat upstairs made a film with me as the Milky Bar Kid, and my brother's the Indian. Okay, and he had a bow and arrow, which he made out of willow, of all things. Right. And it kind of took me back, and I thought, yeah, I actually quite enjoyed that. Till they took the bow off me because the cat was showing signs of stress. So, although willow is a rotten bowwood, it just took me back. And also there was Robin of Sherwood on telly at the time. Yeah, of course. With the delicious Michael Praed in it. And I just thought, I'll give it a go. And I went along to some coaching sessions. Yeah. Beginner's class. And I didn't enjoy shooting at the round things. I stuck with it. Yeah. But I thought there's got to be more to it than this. Right. Okay. And I was fortunate in that I found a field club about 20 miles up the road from me in Bristol. Right. And was introduced to the longbow. And that was it. Hooked. That was it. Obsessed. Since then. Excellent. Yeah. Excellent. Are you still based near Bristol, or you're in Walpole now, aren't you? Yeah, it's near Bridgewater. It's between Bridgewater and Highbridge. It's on the north coast of Somerset. So it's not far from Bristol. It's about 30 miles. Okay, so you're out far west. Okay, excellent. Tell me about this the Heath bow, which was the Mere Heath bow, yeah, which was found near you, and the historical aspect of it. It is the oldest bow, as far as anyone knows, found in England. There's an older bow found in Scotland. It was half a bow, it's broken, and it was found on the Somerset levels, which are peat levels, and very good at preserving things, in the peat. Okay, yeah. And it was a peat worker, actually. Saw this lying by the Sweet Track, which was a Neolithic track. 2500 BC it's dated to, approximately. Wow. Amazing. Did they do the carbon dating on it or anything like that? How did they figure that out? Yeah, it went up to Cambridge. This was back in the 60s, I think. It went up to Cambridge, archaeology and anthropology. They did the tests and they preserved it with carbo wax. Right. And they dated that. There was another bow, the Eddington Birtle, or the Ashcott bow, which is a completely different design, more like a longbow, that was within a couple of decades. So there were these, and they were both made of yew, which was quite a precious resource in those days, judging from the pollen counts. Yeah. So you know, the Mere Heath is a very special bow in particular. I actually have got my approximation here.
Okay. We'll have a look at that
Decorated.
in a bit.
Yeah. It was decorated.
Okay.
The one I've got isn't, but
right. So the one that was found was half a bow, and I mean, fortunately, that Pete worker didn't just think it was a piece of wood or anything. I mean, did he recognize it as a bow or something of importance?
I don't know really. I mean, it's in the mists of time, you know.
Yeah.
But bless him, you know, because
fortunately he did. Yeah.
Cutters are really nasty things. He could have chopped it up, but he did. He saw it beside the track. I mean, there was a yew mallet found in a similar area, and the yew had hardened so much it actually broke the blades on the peat cutter.
Wow.
So, you know, it just shows what preservation and things can do to artifacts.
So that Mere Heath bow would have been belonging to which type of nomadic people, or you know, who would it have belonged to?
The levels were actually underwater a lot of the time. You know, occasionally it was fresh water, salt water. And what happened during the summer was it would dry out, and the people would move from the higher ground to the levels. There is a thought that Somerset means land of the summer people.
Right. Okay.
And they built these incredible tracks. I mean, for Neolithic people, the actual logistics of building these incredible tracks across the swamp, you know, it blows your mind, you know, that the culture must have been very sophisticated in order to create these paths between the high patches of land in the levels. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, no, certainly it's not very easy to work on peat land, which is kind of soft and muddy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously yew wood has been around for ages as well. What type of woods do you yourself prefer to use for longbow? Are there specific woods which work better with the longbow, or you're happy to use whatever type of woods?
Well, they have to be long grained, and obviously they have to be top quality. If you actually see in slow motion the stress that a longbow goes through when it's loosed, you know, you'll think, God, I'm gonna make another one. You know, whoa.
There's a lot of stuff that goes on there, yeah.
Oh yeah. And you can see why they break when people abuse them. They're made of wood after all, and wood gets tired. And the conditions in which they're shot make a difference, you know, temperature and humidity.
Yeah.
In terms of wood, I mean, obviously yew is the favourite, although it can be disappointing. You know, it's I think one of the most variable woods to work with.
Yeah. What are the characteristics of yew that make it quite good for longbows? For example, you wouldn't make a bow out of oak, for example.
Well, the planetary bow is made of oak. And interestingly, the Ashmolean Museum have got a flat bow that was collected in Virginia in the 17th century. And I thought it was ash, but the botanist there swears that it's made of oak. So it depends on the species of oak, you know.
Okay. Yeah.
And also the design of the bow.
Right. Sure.
But yeah, ideally long grained. Lemon wood is favourite because it's quite an homogeneous wood.
Right.
For the belly.
Yeah.
For a core, there are various woods like Purple Heart. That's a fairly standard one. Ipe, which is a very dense wood. Black walnut, which I like. It's my favourite, but it's a bit like yew in that it's got a lot of character. You know, it'll twist, it'll play you up, it'll you know, do whatever.
Yeah.
I think all the best bow woods do play up a bit. They fight you a bit.
So when yeah, sorry, go on.
Well, for the backing, I used to use hickory, but like everything, the quality dropped horribly.
Right.
You know, in the 30 years I've been making them, all the woods really have dropped in quality. And I think I wasn't the only bowyer that had trouble with hickory for the backing. And I went over to bamboo about 20 years ago. Okay,
interesting. Now, presumably bamboo we can't get in this country, so you had to import that from abroad.
Yeah, well, the stuff we get in this country, which is usable but not the best, is moso, which all the bamboo importers bring in to make fencing and so on.
Right. Okay.
It's adequate, but it's not the best.
Yeah.
I mean, you've spoken to Yak Copper Dryer, who grows the stuff.
Correct.
He's actually sent me some laths of bamboo to use. Yeah, it works. It's better than the hickory, which fails, you know.
Right. Interesting. Yeah.
I don't know what they do. Whether they over dry it, or the Americans are keeping the best hickory for themselves, you know, which is quite possible because they've had a growth in traditional archery as well.
Yeah, they have, exactly. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, so when you get, you know, you get a stave of wood, I mean, what process do you go to check through? Do you know, if it has knots and things like that in, do you just put it aside, or are you still able to work with wood that has a few imperfections? I mean, there's no perfect wood, but I mean, there's always some imperfections.
Well, if I'm making a self bow out of yew, you can actually work around some imperfections. I mean, I've got one here that Steve Allerley, I don't know whether you've heard of him.
No.
He's a great American guy. He makes bows like Ishi's bows, and Native American goes hunting with them. He sent me a stave, and it had a huge knot in the limb. And I patched it, and you put a boat-shaped filler, and then you put what's called a bloom on the belly, which is layers. It looks like a flower when you've worked it down, which is what it's called, a bloom. Okay. And that actually rescued a very nice Oregon yew stave. So there are ways around, or what we call a Dutchman, where you drill out a knot, if it's a dead knot. Right. If it's a live knot, you can get away with it, or a small pin, by leaving a raised area around it. So there's various ways, but there are some lumps of yew you just think it's not worth my time. You know, as a professional bowyer doing it for money, sure, I would go, no. Yeah, you know, it wouldn't work. Yeah. When you started using the bamboo, I think that was somewhat of a shift from traditional, you know, English materials of using longbow, then using something different. What was the reaction like for people? Was there an increase in interest of, you know, a longbow made out of bamboo? Some people were resistant. I hung on to a bit of hickory. Interestingly, a guy ordered a bow from me, and he wanted hickory, and I said, well, you know, bamboo is actually sweeter and better. And I had to learn to make the bows completely differently once I used bamboo. So it was interesting. I had to relearn it. Yeah. So I made him exactly the same bow, but with a hickory back on one and a bamboo back on another. Yeah. From the same wood. Okay. And the bamboo was much sweeter. They shot about the same speed. But the bamboo was much sweeter. But he chose the hickory. And I learned from that that the best bow for you is the one that you're happy with. Right. And he bought both, actually, and gave the bamboo back one to his son, who preferred the bamboo. Okay, right. Yeah. So it's not one size fits all, is it? No, not at all. Absolutely. In terms of, okay, you know, I admit my ignorance about kind of the difference between, say, a longbow and a flat bow. So, you know, your longbows have 3 layers. You've got the belly, you've got the core, and then you've got the back. Is that right? And then the flat bow, is that just one stave itself, or what is the difference? Well, going back a bit, you either have a self longbow, which is made out of one piece of wood like yew. Yes. Because the sapwood is good in tension, and the belly, the heartwood, is good in compression. That is crafting a bow, because you have to work with the material as it is. Yes. When you make a laminated bow, you're engineering a bow. Right. So it's a different process, and you can experiment by pre-stressing the core and the backing to get different tillers according to how the bow is going to be used, whether it's going to be a flight bow, general purpose, whatever. So they're both longbows, but the processes are completely different. The dimensions of a longbow are set down, an English longbow is set down by the British Longbow Society. Yeah. Okay. And it needs to be a high stacked D section. Width to depth ratio is 1 to 5/8. Okay. So the depth of the limb has to be at least 5/8 of the width. Okay. Your eyes are glazing over, I can see. I'll just agree with you, Hilary. Yeah, I got it. It's in the rules, you can look it up. And this has been adopted by most countries. Yeah, okay. It's the English longbow. you know, because it's well established. It's been around since the 1950s when the British Longbow Society was founded.
Yeah.
There are people who cheat and make rectangular ones, which drives me mad, but, you know, because it's easier to make a bow with a flat belly, a rectangular section. If you can imagine the compression on a D shape, you know, a D shape, and the risk of it creasing, fretting, is much higher than if you make a flat, wide section.
Yeah. So on the, is it the belly that is got the curved D section and the back is more flat? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I previously asked you about, you know, laminate and composite. I mean, I was probably coming more from a background of Turkish bows and things like that. So my understanding of a composite is where they've got, you know, the sinew, the horn, and things like that. But that's not the case with a longbow, is it?
No, not under the general specification. But people will shoot longbows which they've backed with sinew, you know. It, and of course Native American styles and so on, and people are always experimenting. I've seen them with horn on the back, you know. People will just keep the Americans in particular, they will a longbow shouldn't have a rest. You have to shoot round the handle. You rest it on your knuckle.
Right.
But I've seen longbows with cutouts and rests, you know, particularly from the States. So would
they be able to find the horn long enough to cover a longbow, or?
Oh, they do it in strips and bind it.
Right. Okay.
You know, I mean, I didn't like the look of it very much, but the guy who owned it was happy with it. So, but it wouldn't comply with the British longbow specification as we have it in the longbow class here. Yeah.
Sinew and glue. What do you use? Is it all natural? Is it some modern glue? What do you generally use?
Well, there's no sinew in a longbow, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, not the ones I make anyway. Yeah. But the glue I use is epoxy resin. I mean, you have to give that bow every chance to survive. And you see the way some of them are treated. You know, and also
not great.
Temperature and things like that, it makes a difference. If I sell a bow to a hot country like Australia, I'll put it in a hot box so you can heat the resin to the temperature it has to withstand.
Yeah.
Generally in England, you don't have to do that because until this summer, it's not been that hot, you know, not for any length of time. But I mean, we are talking things like 40 degrees in parts of Australia and other countries.
So it has to be able to obviously withstand that heat. What about colder climates? Have you sent bows to much colder climates?
Yeah, they've been to Sweden. Generally, you're told, particularly with U-bows, you have to warm them up because they can get brittle. And the poundage will go up a bit. And you're generally asked to warm them up or ease them. You know, when you brace them, just give them a few flexes and make sure they're happy.
Yeah. So, you know, a bog standard longbow would take roughly how long for you to make from start to finish?
If it behaves itself, which they don't all do.
Yeah.
Well, it's difficult to say because you can spend days looking for the wood.
Right.
Going around wood yards, you know, and going through pallets and pallets of wood.
But let's say you found that. No. Let's say you found the wood. You got everything ready on your workshop, and right, I'm going to start making the bow now.
God, cutting and pre-stressing, gluing the back and the core together, probably 3 or 4 hours. Sticking the belly on, another half an hour to an hour. That's 5. But the tillering can take anything from 2 hours to 4 hours if it twists, if it plays up. I like to start tillering when the bow's very heavy. I'm training it.
Right.
From, you know, if I'm making a 50-pound bow, it'll be about 80 or 90 pound when I put it on the tiller.
Wow. Okay.
So I'm very slow when it comes to tillering.
Sure.
So, you know, it could be a day. And if it twists, I have to put it on one side because it's fighting me and I'm not in the mood. And I'll go back to it a couple of weeks later and sort it.
Right.
You know, go, well, what was the problem? The problem was me. You know,
pushing it too
so
hard.
you can go back to it and see it with fresh eyes and not get frustrated and solve the problem.
Yeah. I remember I many moons ago I did a kind of bushcrafting course, and part of it was making a very basic kind of, I think it was a flat bow, and so we're there with the tools and we're shaving down the stave and things like that, and I got to the point where we actually got to tiller it. So they had it on a tree, so they had a peg in a tree and you pull it down, and I was quite happy there. And you know, you're on like a little pulley system, you're pulling it, and suddenly I just had a little crack. And the next thing,
horrible.
the next thing it was in 20 pieces. So, and I was actually one of the first. I wasn't rushing, but I was just happened to be one of the first people to get to the tillering point. And so that was an interesting lesson. But it was nice to see how the tillering process works and how you can shave off a little bit here and a little bit there. But I mean, over time, does that come with just experience and looking at something just by eye, or do you actually have specific tools that can measure the tiller?
No, I do it by eye.
All by eye, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know there are tools that, but you see, my bows vary in tiller. Some people like them stiff in the handle. Some people like them compass.
Yeah.
I make some that are whip-ended. You know, they come around like a recurve.
Oh, okay.
So, you know,
is that still would that still be considered a longbow if it has a kind of a recurve in it, or?
Well, it has been a contentious subject, and the British Longbow Society has banned them.
Oh, really?
But in fact, if you look at 16th, 17th century artwork, you know, you will see Chris Boyton, bless him, now gone. He was an excellent, brilliant bowyer.
Yes.
He introduced them, you know, the continental bow, he called them, or the Burgundian. And he had a terrible fight on to get them accepted.
I remember I went to meet him, get some shaft from him down at his workshop. But lovely guy.
Yeah, very knowledgeable.
Okay, so we talked about the woods. What for you? I think you've touched upon it a little bit in terms of the wood can fight you. But what are some of the main challenges in making a longbow? Is it just how the wood reacts to being handled and being glued and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, each wood has its own funny little ways. I mean, I was at one stage using Pau Amarello, which is a very light in hand wood, very interlocked grain, and stank when he worked it. But it did make a very fast bow, but it kicked like hell, you know, but it did make a fast bow. Lemon wood is fairly stable. It's not the most efficient, but you can pretty well predict what it's going to do.
Yeah.
There's another one, Pakir, which you don't see so much now. And Ipe, which has become very popular, very dense. I made the mistake, and I think Chris did this as well, because it's so dense, you make the stave to the normal dimensions before you realise how dense and strong this wood is. So you end up with a bow that's about 180 pound draw weight.
And no one can pull it.
And you know, go, I've got to take this down. I've got to take this down to 50 pound, you know. But that's you only done that once, you know, and you work to it. I keep records of all the bows. I put them all through a chronograph.
Excellent.
So that I know how different woods perform, and to make sure I don't send a turkey out, you know, get the occasional one that you think, what, you know, it's not doing the business.
Yeah. You know, inevitably, I mean, you know, many bow makers, top bow makers, that they will have bows that come back from customers, something has gone wrong or cracked or whatever. I mean, has that happened with you? And in most cases, are you able to still correct whatever the issue is and send it back?
Well, it depends what the problem is.
It depends what it is.
I mean, if it's delaminated, which can happen, you can usually fix that.
Right.
If there's a lift on the back, if there's a failure on the back, you can reback it. I used to joint them in the handle and you know, give them a reflex in the handle, which was a bit of a strain. Occasionally they would fail there, so I stopped doing that because it's very, very reliant on the quality of the glue. Although you could fix that because it was usually a glue failure. Some people just decided they wanted the bow lighter, you know, so they'd come back and say, can you take a few pound off it? One guy insisted he had a 28-inch draw length when he didn't. I sent him away quite happy with a bow made to 26, but his coach told him it wasn't suitable, so I made him another one. Okay. You get that occasionally.
Yeah. If you are taking a couple of pounds off, is it just an issue of kind of shaving off the limbs a little bit, or is there another process involved?
Well, it's always depressing to alter a bow that is shooting well. Yes,
of course. Yeah.
You know, and you have to think the customer's always right. But there comes a stage when you say, no, I can't take £15 off that bow. I can take 4 or 5 off it.
Sure.
But I'll completely ruin it if I take any more than that off it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you know, we think of longbows one piece, but there's also if I'm correct, a carriage bow which comes in 2 pieces. Is that right?
Yeah.
And what was the story behind that? Because it's joined at the handle.
Yeah, it was. Well, it's in the name, isn't it? Carriage bow. It's easy to.
Horse and carry
around.
Right,
yeah,
okay,
and the French in particular like them with their beer salt longbows. A lot of them were takedown bows. I don't know if you know, but there's a very good museum in Crépy-en-Valois in France. Excellent. If you're ever in France, make sure you go and visit. And it has quite a lot of these bows in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was, I suppose, in the Renaissance of the bow, you know, the Prince Regent, you know, 17th, 18th, 19th centuries. I haven't really looked into the history, but obviously it was easy to cart one of those around on a horse or in a carriage, or on a motorbike.
If that's your thing. Just a quick look back into history. Okay, you know, the Agincourt and the British and the French. What bows were the French using at that time? Were they similar to the longbows, or they had their own type of bow?
Yeah, I mean, they had a good contingent of longbowmen. They just didn't know how to deploy them. That was the basic problem. The reason it's known as the English longbow, rather than, I know the Welsh are trying to call it the Welsh longbow, is because there was a system of deployment, manufacture and training under the English kings.
Yeah.
That's why it was known as the English longbow, because they knew it was the artillery of its day and they knew how to use it, which is why it was so successful in Europe.
Yeah, much more comprehensive thing to it. One thing you mentioned to me, back to someone coming for a bow and things like that, an interesting thing that you do is you actually watch the person shoot before you start even making the bow for them. That's also part of your kind of customer process, right, of making a bow?
Yeah, because I'm happier. I think the customer's happier because it's bespoke, custom made for him. Or her. Also, I don't always believe them when they tell me what they're drawing. You know, they come, they're sort of 4'11" and tell me they've got a 28-inch draw, and I'm going, well, your knuckles aren't scraping the ground. Please shoot this bow. Also, they want to order a bow that's too heavy for them.
Right.
So I have bows of various weights here that they can try. And you can say, well, look, I could make you a bow of that weight, but you'll struggle with it, you'll injure yourself. It's up to you, but my advice is maybe come down a couple of pounds.
Yeah.
I don't think people realise how £5, £6 difference in bow weight, draw weight. Actually, how much that actually is, you know, in physical usage.
Definitely. Moving on, I wanted to talk about, I mean, flight archery in Britain has been going on for quite some time. Probably one of the oldest kind of practices in archery, and it's spread to other places. You know, we were speaking to Yap and Kay yesterday about the flight archery annual meet in Utah and things like that.
Yeah.
Turkey has had a long history of flight archery as well, with the Fetih Cup and things like that. Are you involved in any way in the flight archery in the UK, and do people use longbows there as well?
Oh yeah, it's my favourite form of shooting, actually. You've heard of roving marks, haven't you? Which is distance shooting at unmarked distances. It's battle practice.
Right.
There used to be an excellent meeting at Badminton where they used to do flight shooting. You know, you'd have the roving marks and then there'd be a big flight shoot, perfect for it. The problem is getting the space. You know, you need 300 plus yards.
Right.
But it was fascinating to see the, you know, the design of bow, arrow, how they worked, the kinetics between the warbow boys shooting 100-pound plus and the little 25-pounders with their little dinky flight arrows, you know, to actually see how the thing worked. And I'm not much of a romantic, but I'll be honest, when you see that arrow go up twinkling in the sun, a bit of your soul goes with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you get that. And when there's a whole row of you all shooting, you can still pick your arrow out, even though there might be 100 arrows up there. You can follow your arrow.
Amazing.
So there's some sort of connection.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Usually it's disappointing when it comes down because it's 40 yards past or off.
It's good for a couple of moments in the air, though.
Yeah. Your heart goes.
But that annual flight archery is still happening in the UK?
I think it does. I have very little to do with it now because I haven't shot for a while for health reasons.
Okay.
But I know that it is still continuing, and they're far more organised than we ever were. You know, they do it in poundage, you know, of the bows and so on.
Right.
And when I used to run shoots, I always used to try and fit in a flight shoot because, as I say, it was my favourite, and people love it because they don't get the chance very often just to welly their bows, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. No, most clubs it's all you know rules and regulations and limits and things like that, so they don't really
bloody whistles.
Yeah. One whistle for this, two for that, three for that. I get confused.
Yeah.
Okay, someone did actually send in a couple of questions regarding longbow. Can longbow be used on a horse?
Yeah, there's pictures.
Aha, okay.
There's one of a skirmish in Blanche-Tac, which is in the Agincourt campaign. And there's in the Tameth Hours, there's a woman stringing a bow on horseback. Very difficult.
Wow.
High, you know, cantle on the saddle.
Yes.
To brace, you know, a bit like a jousting saddle.
Yes.
And the bottom knot goes in the stirrup.
Ah, okay.
She's stringing it like that.
Interesting. Wow. Okay.
Also, Mike Ashington, when I tried to get the horseback archery going, he shot a shortish longbow. I mean, they don't all have to be 6 foot, 7 foot long.
No, okay, they can be shorter.
I mean, the rules are, I think, for a draw length of 28 inches, you can have a bow as short as 66 inch.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I think a lot of people just assume that, you know, longbows were always, you know, for foot cavalry, for foot soldiers, never used as cavalrymen on horses, but that's not necessarily the case. You did mention, I mean, you know, you've had and you still continue to have a very kind of long and interesting career, and you've been involved in a lot of different things. So you did mention that the horse archery. Just tell us a little bit briefly about how that started, how it was organized, and what your plans were for it before it kind of fizzled out a bit.
Yeah, it's one of the big failures. Depresses me really.
Yeah, and I hate to kind of, you know, be you know, make people sad or anything like that. But I think it's important that we know what people have tried to do in the past, and kind of if we can learn from any mistakes that not necessarily you've done, but just how things shouldn't have been done, and if we try it again, how we can improve on that. That's all really.
Well, I ran a society, SPTA.
Yeah.
And I had seen, I can't remember, maybe on telly or on video, Kasai Lajos over in Hungary.
Yeah.
And a small team of us went out there, and it was inspiring. I mean, these guys were just phenomenal. And the two guys who came with me, they had a go at it, Mike Ashington and Martin Knight. Two completely different riders. Anyway, we didn't disgrace ourselves. And I thought, God, this is so exciting, you know, all enthused. So for 10 years, I struggled. Lots of money. I learnt to ride myself. there was some opposition from archers here for whatever reason.
Right, okay.
I had a riding school, the one which I used to go to at Churchill, near Bristol, all lined up. Mike Ashington, who used to ride for the King's Troop, went and tried all the horses, which was fascinating to watch because they don't like the rattle of the arrows or, you know, but he actually managed to sort out the good ones. And then the insurers let us down. Having said initially that they would cover us, when I went and said, look, I want this riding school to be part of the cover, they said, oh, we can't insure you at all. Denied all knowledge of having the conversation.
Right, right.
So, pardon me, I've got this chest infection. I sort of thought, well...
Yeah, that was that.
And the problem is, I think the people in this country who ride horses don't take the archery seriously. And I think what a lot of the archers didn't like, and when it was on television where presenters would try their hand, the horse would sort of amble up to the target and they drop the arrow onto the target and then they amble off again. And people go, huh?
Is that it? Yeah.
Yeah, is that all there is? And, you know, you're thinking, God, you need to see it done properly, like the Abusami.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Fantastic. We went to Japan in the Park in London. Every 10 years they hold Japan in the Park, and they had the Abusami from the Ogasawara school.
Oh, lovely.
Phenomenal. On polo ponies, you know, that they've never ridden before.
Amazing, yeah. No, they say polo ponies are very good for horse archery because they're so desensitized to noise, and you know they're used to just getting into scraps and fights and things like that. That you know, horse archery is nothing.
Because you control them with your seat and your legs.
Right.
Because obviously in polo and in horseback archery, you're not using the reins, the bridle to control them. Yeah. You know, you're using your legs. But the Japanese system of riding is quite different. They stand up in the saddle and use their heels to pace.
I see.
Pace the horses.
Yeah.
But and again, we did some training with reenactors' horses. Same thing applies because they were used to jousting, sword, whatever. Yeah. The seat and the legs controlled them. And your hands were free. Yeah.
I mean, you know, I think there's still somewhat of there are ripples around, you know, at the moment with people trying to kind of get the horse archery going. But you know, from my point of view, it's just a bit of a shame that we are still somewhat spectators on the world scene in terms of other countries are just really moving ahead with it. Yeah. You know, yes, I mean there are always going to be kind of these insurance issues and red tape and bureaucracy, but people are just kind of really pushing forward with that, and I feel that we're just going to get left behind, which would be a real shame, you know, as we have been with a number of other things. But
I think the insurance issue is sorted now. I mean, we were before, you know, I was before the time, really.
Yes, right.
I think the insurance, but I'm not sure whether the people who ride, their hearts are in it wholeheartedly. It's just another martial art to do. Yeah. On a horse, you know, they do jousting and swordsmanship, and by the way, we do archery. Whereas if you read Kashai's book, you know, he says there's archery, there's horses, there's riding, and there's horseback archery, which is a third thing altogether, that you have to combine them and be 100% of both. And I found that a lot of the people who could ride didn't take the archery seriously, you know, and that was frustrating.
I think for most people it was just a bit of a bit of fun really for them, and that's as far as it went, rather than something a bit more serious. Let's move on briefly to you went out to Korea, didn't you? And you know, I think Stephen Selby had somewhat of an influence on that. And what was that trip like, and who did you meet, and what was that trip about when you went out there?
I went out there to give a talk on the English longbow because they had a seminar. But I met some amazing people out there. And the interesting thing was the Koreans had absolutely no idea about anybody else's archery. Wow. Really? You know, they were saying, we shoot the furthest distance. And we were going, no, clout in England, 180, it's, you know. But I learned a hell of a lot. It was 2007 was the first one. And thanks to Stephen Selby for twisting my arm to go out there. And I met the most amazing people. really knowledgeable. It just opened my eyes to world archery and world traditions, and I was just so enthused, and we had some good parties as well.
That made it all worthwhile.
Pretty famous parties, particularly with the Norwegians and the Mongolians.
Oh yes.
Yeah, we terrified the Koreans. We were having this, you know, because they were going, it's 10 o'clock now, you go to bed? What? Starting. So they learned a lot as well.
Yes.
But, yeah, it was just a magic thing over there. I went for 5 years.
Okay.
Every year for 5 years.
Is that annual meeting still happening now, or it's not no longer?
No, they had a reorganisation, and to be honest, the last one I went to was dreadful.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fair, and I think the archery was just an excuse to get funding between you and me.
Oh, right.
Because we weren't treated. I don't think we were treated particularly well, and I got really frustrated and cross, as did a lot of people. But people still go back. I think they have held another one since.
Yeah.
But they go to meet their friends.
Yeah.
I mean, we all went there to promote archery, and we couldn't, but at least we had our friends there. You know, it's like a circuit.
Yeah, as a network. Yeah. Okay, Mary Rose, the bows that were found there, the archers, you know, fact or fiction, etc., etc. Firstly, bows were found on the Mary Rose, correct?
Yeah, 138, I think. Altogether.
138 bows. Did they find out what poundage they were, roughly?
Yes. Well, this is a bone of contention. You see, Mr. Hardy, who was a trustee. I had quite a long chat with Alex Hildred, because I did a couple of demos at the old Mary Rose Museum, and I stayed with her, and we had long chats. And she said, you wouldn't shoot a cannonball out of a cannon you'd brought up from the seabed, but they thought it was perfectly all right to draw up a
bow, yeah,
a longbow, you know.
Yeah.
Spoke volumes to me, really. But people have made approximations, and they are, I would say, this is only my opinion, and Chris, I think as well, Chris Boyton, on average about £90. Right. And then there were some really special ones that were well above that.
And the you know, the skeletons that were found on there, what, you know, it suggests that they were overbowed, or maybe not overbowed, but they were, you know, either right or left hand archers, judging by the spine, the skew in the spine of those skeletons. Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, have you been to the museum?
I haven't actually been there yet, no.
You'll have to go. It is a magic place. It really is magic, and they've done a beautiful job there. It's won all sorts of awards, and there are bows everywhere.
Right.
But yes, they talk about they can tell the archers by the shoulder girdle.
Right.
And what actually happens is, because they're shooting from an early age by law, the collarbone and the scapula don't fuse, because it's in constant movement, so it doesn't get the chance.
Right.
So they could tell. I mean, the bones were jumbled up. They did find complete skeletons of archers, but that was the main thing. There were also spinal deformations, and also the elbow of the bow arm would be developed, and the bone would be flattened because of the pressure.
Yeah. You mentioned that, you know, at that time, you know, archery was kind of compulsory for young kids, obviously to prepare them for warfare and things like that. What is your view today of, you know, in the school system, of having archery as much more of like a, you know, maybe not a mainstream sport, but something that was has a much more you know, something that is a lot more practiced from primary up through to secondary. You know, I mean, you know, archery itself has a lot of social benefits, and in terms of character building, things like that. Do you think that has any legs on it, you know, in terms of implementing archery in schools today?
Well, they used to do archery a lot more, didn't they?
They did, yeah, exactly, they did.
And one of the problems, people wanted to reintroduce it because there were so many films like The Hunger Games and The Hobbit and things like that with archery. People go, oh, archery, I want to do archery. So some schools actually got kit, or they found the old kit, you know, the old Jake's bows and Slazengers.
Yeah.
But they had a problem getting coaches because in order to teach, you had to have certain qualifications. I don't know how many schools actually do archery now. I think some do it as an after-school thing. But I believe it would be a great thing if it was a regular sport in school with school children of whatever age. You know, as far as I'm concerned, as long as a kiddie can stand up, he can draw a bow. You know, as long as someone points him in the right direction.
Sure.
You know,
and I think in this current environment, it's a great social distance sport. You know, there's no contact. You don't have to be very close to anyone.
no.
It's quite a good sport for that. But
yeah, and it's you and the target. It's not anyone else.
Right.
Is it?
Right. No, you know, correct. Yeah.
As you say, you know, you're not playing against. Well, you are against another team in terms of points, but it is, as you say, it's character forming. You know, in the fact that you have to be disciplined enough to hit that target, know what you're doing, and stick with it. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Miss 10 times, but you keep trying. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. In the green again.
Exactly. I see you've got some really lovely arrows behind you and some arrowheads. I wondered if we could maybe take a look at them. And
yeah, I did them specially for you.
Excellent. Yeah, let's not waste that. Let's have a look at them and tell us if you do arrow making as well, and your experience with that.
Well, where do I start? I have a collection of medieval style arrows here. The different heads. Now I get the heads from Hector Cole, a name you must have come across.
Yes, I've come across him.
Yeah, he's a good friend of mine, and he's been making arrowheads since he was 16, and he's in his 80s now.
Wow.
So,
okay.
He knows his stuff, and he's taught an awful lot of people and given a lot of information to other arrowsmiths.
Right.
But he's the man for me when it comes to getting the arrowheads. So, I mean, I can recommend people go on his website if they want to learn about different arrowheads. He's got them all on there, and
excellent. Yeah.
you know the type. But I have here an elm war bow. Difficult to fit a 6'6" bow on a little TV screen, but it just gives you some idea of the girth of a 100-pound bow.
Looks like a python snake or something. So
well, it's a broom handle, basically.
Yeah.
Now this has been around the world. It's one I give to people just to see if they can draw 100-pound bows.
Gosh.
And believe it or not, some people can. Never drawn a bow before.
Really?
Yeah.
But then they probably do their shouldering or something, don't they?
No. I mean, there was a farmer at Badminton once, and he pulled it like it was what we call gorilla's snot. You know, just whoa back. And he said, you've done it before. He said, no. And we tried to get him involved in the warbow trials, but he wasn't interested. You know, he was just there for a day out and walked away, and there were a lot of
yeah.
So I make arrows to a pattern. Like there's the Mary Rose pattern. Obviously, they've got many arrows and they've been surveyed.
Yeah.
There were some very long, heavy arrows, which obviously were shot out of the 100+, 140-pound-ish.
Yeah.
But a lot of them were quite short, you know, 28-inch or something. Now Hector, I haven't got one because I sold the last one. But Hector makes a Mary Rose type head. You see that? Is that clear?
Okay, right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is like a bodkin, but it's got 4 corners, whatever.
4 sides,
so,
yeah. And would that be is that an armor piercing one or shield piercing?
No, that's an armor piercing one.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah, that weighs. Well, I don't know. I'll tell you. This weighs. I've got to wait for me. I should have done this earlier.
It's all right.
That weighs 13 grams. That weighs 35.
Oh, right. 3 times as heavy. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, we did some warbow tests with Mark Stretton,
Mm-hmm.
Ministry of Defence Labs at Shrivenham, and tested the kinetic energy, and we did slow motion tests and calculations. And the interesting thing was they got their computer out, and this also happened on Meet the Ancestors, where I did a Mere Heath.
Oh, yes.
They took the speed, put it in their little calculations, and got it wrong, basically.
Really?
Yeah, I'll Meet the Ancestors, the guy said the bow would only do 70 yards.
Oh.
Well, we did 140 without even trying before we cut the fletchings off.
Yeah.
And then Mr. No, I better not give his name. He was there on the computer, and he was saying, "Oh, the longbow, it's no good. Blah, 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 it's rubbish. All this, that, and the other. It couldn't have been effective." And he was going like this on the computer. He said, "As I expect, the impact energy will be about 30 joules." And suddenly his face went like, "Whoa!" And this big un, 60 plus, at the impact end, which will knock you off your horse.
Oh, it's easily, Forget the damage. I mean, it will just the impact will knock you off. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got some slow motion film we did there, and you don't actually have to penetrate the breastplate. We had plates of different angles, and as long as it's there long enough to impart its kinetic energy, it's done its job. It doesn't have to go in through the breastplate or whatever. Yeah, and you can imagine hundreds or thousands of them coming at you. It's intensely disruptive.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think he had a bit of an eye opener, that gentleman.
Yeah, indeed. Some of the larger arrowheads behind you, I mean, they're for different things.
Yes, the ones. This is known as the device's swallowtail, and it's actually a small one.
Really? Oh my God.
Yeah, there are ones that sort of come out at 6-inch length barbs. And they were really for hunting, probably deer, because it was a big social occasion. You'd have a phalanx of archers. They would drive them with special dogs, and they'd big long cutting edges, big wound. Yeah. Job done.
Yeah, that's what you need. Yeah.
Yeah. Interestingly, Mark, again, because he works with a deer herd, proved the difference between all these tests done on long dead meat, like shooting at a pig. Just come out of the freezer or whatever. Right. Compared to an animal that was recently living and still had some sort of energy. And he did tests, a bit gory, but he says the flesh actually retreats in shock. So the wound is far bigger than you would actually get literally just from the spinning arrow.
Oh, I see. Interesting.
So, as I say, empirical testing, Mark's your man.
Yeah.
But there are various shapes.
What about that half moon one?
Oh yeah, that's again. There was this stuff about it being for shooting rigging on ships.
Right, for cut the ropes and things like that.
But in actual fact, it's not, because it's spinning. Yes. Again, Mark tested it. He said he eventually got it to cut a rope as long as it was taut. But if you look at most cultures, they have arrowheads like this, whether they're a spade shape or Y shape, and they will go into the bird or the rabbit rather than through. Right. So you've got your arrow and your game.
I see. Okay.
Whereas if you shot a bird with a bodkin or whatever, it would go straight through, and the bird's one way and the arrow's gone the other.
So you have to go and find it. Okay, so that one just basically pins it down.
Yeah, it stays in there, screws its way into the flesh.
Interesting. You're again a bit of a jump back on the end of your bows. What do you use for the tips, where the limb tips are? Is it bone or horn, or is it just?
I use buffalo horn. Most people use buffalo horn.
All right.
Because it's quite easy to work. It has been readily available, but of course a lot of it comes from China and third world countries. But of course they're going over to tractors. They're getting richer. And our source, he actually closed down his business last year.
Oh dear.
So I don't know where. I mean, I've got stocks, but I don't know where people are getting the horn from now. It stinks. I hate working horn. It's horrible. But yeah, again, the Longbow Society require you to have horn knocks.
Okay. And what would, I mean, you know, back in the day, you know, Victorian time, I mean, that they wouldn't have used horn, would they? They would have, it would just been.
Yeah. I mean, they can use cow horn,
Okay.
any solid horn, sheep's horn, anything that just. Somebody gave me some deer horn to work, but it wasn't big enough really. But that can be used.
Right.
So
yeah, I guess they could have used some local horn. In your career of learning bow making, was it trial and error, you know, making a lot of mistakes and, you know, breaking a lot of bows, or did you actually have a teacher or someone who kind of mentored you or showed you all of the basics?
Well, at the time I started making, there weren't many bow makers around, longbow makers. And the reason I started was because I was told I'd have to wait 6 months. I thought, oh, I'll buy a kit of parts, and so that's what I did.
Okay.
The first bow I won quite a lot of medals with. There weren't many women longbow around at the time. You could count this on the fingers of one hand.
Yeah.
The second one broke. But I was hooked by then. There was a little pamphlet by a gentleman called Stuart Homer, who's actually a cabinet maker, but did make bows. Just a little pamphlet, and that's how I started.
Oh, okay.
And then largely self-taught, really, experimenting. Yeah. Yeah.
And so now, you know, in terms of, obviously you need a certain number of tools to actually shape the bow and things like that, but much of the measuring is just done by eye.
No, well, it's an interesting thing. When I used to run the workshops, people would come and they'd mark it all out with pencil. And I go and take all that off, you know. But inside that piece of wood, there's a bow wanting to come out.
Right.
And you've got to find it. You don't impose on that piece of wood. However, when you are engineering a bow with laminations, you tend to use rough measurements, approximate measurements. And if you've made enough bows, you know, you get a feel for the balance, shape by eye.
Yeah.
But occasionally when a bow goes wrong, you get the measuring stick out.
Yeah. That's just what you have to do.
Sometimes you have an off day.
Yeah.
You go cross-eyed or whatever, you know, you're not coping, you know, you think, I ought to give up, you know, but...
Have you ever tried other types of bows? Making other types of bows, like shorter bows, horse bows, or, I don't know, Korean bow, or something like that?
I made a couple of sinew-backed bows. But to be honest, I got very busy making longbows. So all my idea of experiments and the idea of a follow-up book to the Archer's Handbook went out the window because I just didn't have the time. And they take a lot longer to make, to be honest. The various processes. And the materials weren't too easy. Now, horn bowyers, you know, they've got this network of materials and things. You know, 15, 20 years ago, it wasn't so easy to get hold of sinew and hide glue.
I can imagine,
all of good enough quality.
That's right.
So it would have been a bit more of a struggle and more time consuming.
Yeah, absolutely.
But now, you know, they're going great guns, these horn bows. There's some fantastic work going
on. You did mention the SPTA, which again, you were a key person behind organising that and running that. That had a long span of about 30 years or something now. That unfortunately it had ended. I mean, is that because of just time constraints and it was just getting too much? And was it just yourself running it, or did you have a fewer people helping you out?
Well, I had a lot of help. The great thing about it was everyone was like-minded. It was about archery. It wasn't about shooting. It wasn't about medals. It was about archery. And the people who were members got that. And the people who came to the shoots got that. unfortunately, most of these people were already well committed to their own clubs and societies, and they worked for archery already.
Yeah.
So when it came to saying, well, would anyone like to take it on? And the potential is great because we had contacts all over the world.
Yeah.
We used to meet every year at the big shoot in April. But there was nobody really who had the time to step forward because they were already well committed.
Yeah.
So sadly, it had to go. My health, I was just getting too much for me, really, even though I was getting considerable help. The stress of running it. I don't think people realise how much work goes into running a shoot.
No,
an international one, organising.
No, exactly.
Coming over and,
If they haven't even organised a local one, they'll have no idea what it's like to run such a large one. Again, I was talking to Yap and Kay Copperdry and just organising the flat archery in the Utah, and then they were busy with the Fort Dodge horse archery thing, which again fizzled out. And I mean, they were so busy, but unfortunately, it's a thankless task to organise these things. People they enjoy coming along, but they don't appreciate or think about the hard work, the months and months of work that's gone in to organising. So I mean, if it means anything, just for that, the fact that you were behind that, we should commend you and thank you for your hard work with that, and also with the handbook, the traditional archer's handbook, and just generally for keeping kind of the longbow tradition alive in this country, which I think is a very, very important thing to maintain as well.
Well, it was not just me. I do have to say I did enjoy it. And on the Saturday night, we had a 2-day shoot at a scout camp here. It was brilliant facilities. The buzz in the hall, with the Turks and the Greeks and the French, and just the buzz.
Yeah.
I just stand there with my pint, or maybe 2 or 3, just,
taking it all in.
Just taking it all in, because I'd be knackered, to be honest. I would be absolutely exhausted, but it was just that warm sort of reward.
Yeah.
So it wasn't all work,
Yeah.
But I'm not the only one who I mean, the longbow has kept going thanks to a lot of people who just quietly get on with it.
Yeah.
Unsung heroes, who
just
quietly promote it and
keep going,
know about it and share their knowledge. They're all over the place, but you don't hear about them.
Yeah. So post COVID, when all this madness hopefully passes us by, are you, apart from obviously just making your longbows, is there anything planned for the remainder of 2020 or 2021 for Hilary?
No.
Come on, I thought you were going to say no. I'm planning a worldwide tour or something like that.
No. Well, I had for this summer planned to visit some archery friends. Peter Decker, who I think you've contacted.
Yeah.
Connie Swiss and her family, lovely family over in Switzerland, just to visit archers.
Yeah.
Because they're good friends and they're lovely people.
Yeah.
And to get back to meeting up with some family, because time just flies by when you're working.
Absolutely.
And you're doing these things. And I thought, I can go quiet now and sort of do a bit more relaxing things. But sod it. Look what happens. Well, they say, life's what happens when you're busy making plans, I think is the saying.
Yeah, that's right.
Very frustrating,
Exactly, yeah.
But that's my plan still. Not very little to do with archery. I still have a Facebook page for SPTA. I have links with a couple in Spain who've been inspired by SPTA and want to start something over there, but it's a bit under wraps at the moment.
Okay.
But it's nice to know you've inspired people, and people still talk about the shoots and the people they met. And Facebook has been, I know you're not on it, but it's been brilliant for us all keeping in touch with each other and finding out what's going on. And
it certainly has its benefits for sure.
Yeah.
Has its benefits. But no, look, I think the fact that your name has come up on a number of other interviews I've done with, the more, how would I say, definitely, certainly the respected people in the archery world, traditional archery world, they kept saying, "Oh, you must speak to Hilary. She's in your country. You must speak to her." So I think you have definitely inspired a lot of people with your work, and you know, the past work that you've done with, you know, the handbook and all the groups that you've helped organize. So so we appreciate that, and we hope you know, your chest infection gets better, and you know, we come out of this COVID situation hopefully safe, and safe and sane.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a strange one. It's a really strange
the sanity is the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah. I know some people are managing to get out to shoot, you know, which is good.
Yeah, there's a slow, gradual opening of clubs and things like that. So people are slowly starting to shoot again, which is good. But
it's good medicine, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. But Hilary, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for sitting with me,
thank you.
And giving us your time and giving us a little insight into your world there. You know, God bless your work, and God bless you. Keep you safe, keep you healthy, and keep you strong as well. Yeah,
and the same to you. Best wishes, and enjoy your other interviews. I'm sure you've got a long list lined up.
Yeah, it's snowballed into something which I didn't really expect. But while I have the opportunity and you know, the ability to speak to these special people, I want to take the opportunity now and just have it as a, you know, this whole thing is just going to be like a resource for people to use online, and to get in, and just to be exposed to people like yourself and people they've read about but never spoken to or met, you know. So if it can be useful in one way or another, then that's good enough for me.
You're doing a good job. Shall I send you some references?
Please do.
Mark's blog and various
Absolutely.
things.
I'll put that on the description of the video, and people can access that as well. Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll send that through by email.
Excellent. All right, Henry. Have a good day. Thank you very much.
All right then.
All the best. Take care. All right, bye.